So good morning, everyone. My name is Mamun Khan, and I work as the program manager at ARCC. Welcome to our session today on what is advocacy. Before we begin today's session, I need to go through some housekeeping very quickly. So just to make you aware that this meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube and website. Please feel free to switch off your video if you are uncomfortable on being on camera. That's not a problem at all. If anyone wishes to discuss any sensitive issues during today's session and do not want it to be recorded, please just tell us beforehand and we can just edit that section out very easily. Everyone is muted as you come in. This is just purely so that we can have a constructive meeting. You can post your questions, comments, and suggestions via the chat facility. You will also have an opportunity to ask questions directly later in the meeting. Please do not post any links or images or you may be removed from the meeting. This is purely for online safety for all of us. We are on social media, so please feel free to follow us at ARCC Ltd on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I will now hand over to my colleague Bina, who is a lead on the mental health project, to coordinate today's session. So over to you, Bina.
Hi, thank you, Mamoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So today's workshop with Alan and Michael is part of our Here to Talk initiative by ARCT to raise the awareness of mental health issues in the Asian and Croydon communities. So our aim with this project is to bring mental health topics to everyday conversations without having a stigma attached to it. This is so that we have an understanding of signs to look out for the most common issues faced by our community and our loved ones. We can all become a champion for our families, friends, and our colleagues. So now I'll just introduce you to Alan and Michael. So Alan Levy has been working for Advocacy for All for over 10 years. So previously Alan worked with Age UK, HSBC and Thomas Cook, where he developed his skills in customer service and passion for making a difference. I think that's what we're all here to do, like making a difference. So since working for Advocacy for All, Alan has been able to make a big difference to people's quality of life and well-being. Alan, so one of the quotes that Alan says is it just gives me so much pride in the work that I do, knowing I actually make a difference, giving people bigger voices and better lives. And then we've got Michael Edwards. So Michael is from Mind in Croydon. So Michael has worked in the voluntary sector since 2004. And from 2007 has worked in mental health advocacy and has been practicing as a qualified IMH since 2009. I'm going to leave it to Michael to explain that that short form. So Michael has extensive experience in delivering advocacy services and leading advocacy teams in community mental health services, inpatient psychiatric services and forensic mental health, inpatient and community services. All of Michael's experience has been in South London, Southwark, Lambeth, and since 2018, Michael has managed the advocacy service provided by Mind in Croydon. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass you over to Alan, who's going to start the session for us, and we'll be sharing some slides too.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invite today, Bina, and having me and Michael along. It's a real privilege to be here with everyone. If we start the slides, we can go through. If there are any questions, as there's only a small group of us today, I don't mind a hands up. If not, we have got some sections to answer any questions that you may have. But today we're going to be talking about the advocacy that I've worked in for many years and that Michael has as well. Michael works for Mind. Michael will look at the IMHA, the IMHA, which is Independent Mental Health Advocacy. And that is Michael's speciality. My section today is I'm going to be looking at Care Act advocacy and IMCA, IMCA, which stands for Independent Mental Capacity Advocate. So there's all different types of advocacy that we're going to have a look at and explore today, and hopefully it will become clearer maybe when you might need these in your life, who might need this in their life, and maybe when will it be appropriate. So if we have a look at the next slide. So what is advocacy? Advocacy basically means getting support from another person to help you express your views and wishes, to help you stand up for your rights, and someone who helps you in this way is called your advocate. So we kind of say in the field that there's a capital A advocacy and there's a small a advocacy. Capital A might be kind of like a paid service from a professional, and a small a may be something that any of you do with your friends, family, and colleagues by supporting them in a different way. Someone might come to you and have a conversation about a problem that they're facing, talking it through with you. You give them some guidance. Have you tried this? Have you thought about that? That is advocacy, is helping someone to come, it's supported decision making, helping them come to a decision. If we have a look at the next slide, please. So when we start to engage with our people, our clients that we work with, we have to be really boundaried in the work that we do. We're not everything to everyone, and we can't actually give advice. So things that we can do and things that advocacy is about being independent and impartial. So our contract may be with a council, for example, but we don't answer to the council, we answer to the individual. It's very person-centered, and we are on the side of the person that we're working with to fight for their rights and have their voice heard. So we help people to have their voices heard, secure their rights, represent their interests at meetings where decisions are made. So that could be like a care meeting with the council about, am I going to receive care at home? Am I going to a care home, supported living? Who is going to help me manage my life? Work in partnership. So we don't come in and take over. What we would do is sit alongside you and ask what's important to you, what things you would like, and where you see your life going. So if under Care Act, for example, that's about care planning and making sure that you can wash, dress, eat, access your local community. So we would be asking you, what's important to you? There's bits in there around communication, religious beliefs, what's important to you. It is all about that individual that we work with, and making sure that people doing the assessments, like social workers, we need to make sure that they hear what you are saying and make sure that they take it into account when they're working out a care plan for you, to make sure that you can access places of worship, can make sure that you can go to the shops and see your friends, and make sure that you can wash, dress, and eat. We promote social inclusion, equality, and social justice. That sounds quite highfalutin, but basically that is kind of, again, making sure that you're included in decisions about you, making sure that you're included in your community, making sure that people listen to you and treat you fairly and equally, and don't put you at a disadvantage. And things like that we can challenge. And if we're not happy with an assessment for you, or you're not, we can then write to challenge and get them to do it again. And we always promote choice and control. It's your choice and you're in control. It's your life and we're not here to take over. So things that we can't do, or things that we're not, is it's not long-term support. So it's very much decision focused. What is the decision you are facing? It could be change of accommodation, for example. So we would be there around, what are your options? Where would you like to go? Is it near family and friends? Are the council perhaps asking you to leave your area away from family and friends? So there's things in legislation and human rights about a right to family life and a right to friends. So things like that are on our side to help promote your rights. We won't give advice, which might sound a bit funny, but we give options. So what is it you would like to do? So advice is maybe telling someone, but options are about giving you a selection of things for you to choose from. So again, we may not be all inclusive and all encompassing, but it's a really good communication and being on the side of the individual. We won't agree or say that we're going to get everything you want. We're not in charge of that part of the process. So what we would say is we will give you a voice. We will make sure that your rights are upheld and that other people doing the process are following the process correctly. So it could be that you ask for something that's not realistic or within that care plan, for example, but we would then explore that with the social worker to try and work out how we could meet those needs for you. We're not befrienders and we're not family, so we're very boundaried. We don't have any other role in the person's life, so it's not about crossing boundaries or muddying the waters. It is a very clear, specific role that we have in someone's life. It will be about this decision. Once you have come to that decision, we will no longer be in your life. And people can dip in and out at any stage of those things as long as they're eligible. We'll have a look at eligibility in a minute. We're not legal and we're not solicitors. So if there is anything that pops up along the process, we would signpost and help somebody engage with the legal process that would be right for them. Influence, opinion, say what we think is best. So we won't try and influence our individual or the person that we're working with, and we won't say what we think is best. Even though we may have lived this and seen it time and time again, it's an individual journey for that person. So what we would try to do is maybe influence the outcomes based on what that person wants. So we could speak to the social worker and try and get evidence, so as an evidence-based approach, as to why that would be best for that person, because they have to go off and speak to their managers and try and get the funding agreed. So as long as we have the evidence there, it makes it really hard for them to say no. So we don't make the decisions, we help someone make their decision, and we don't take sides. So it's about factual information, it's about supporting that individual. And if we were to take a side, it would be on the side of our individual to make sure that they have a voice, but not legally take their side. So different types of advocacy. What's the next slide on that one, please? Thank you. So we kind of said briefly about there's different types of advocacy, and also as individuals and people with friends and family, you probably advocate on people's behalves and maybe not even know about it or even realized. But the ones that are statutory, that have a legal requirement and a duty of care, so that means that social services might have to get an advocate involved in one of these situations. It's not a must. Sorry, in the Care Act legislation, it says there's a must or a could or a can. So where it says must, they have to do it. So if you ever look through Care Act legislation and it says they must do this, that is your right to make sure that that happens. So the council have to give you a Care Act assessment to work out, so they will work out eligibility. So Care Act looks at things along the lines of a Care Act review, safeguarding, carers, transitions. And transitions is a stage of going from children's services into adult services. So things might be changing. So in that stage, someone who is maybe 16, 17, up to that stage, it would have been about their care, support, and school needs and educational needs. But when they become adults, like 18, 19s and up to the 25 bracket, depending sometimes, that's when we're looking at adult services and what's needed then. The IMCA, so we call it IMCA, IMCA. It's not the YMCA, but the IMCA is the Independent Mental Capacity Advocate. IMCAs will only get involved in about 5 decisions, and the individual has to lack capacity. So lacking capacity means they're not able to make a decision around a particular topic, for example. It could be that it's someone maybe with dementia that maybe is not able to maybe decide the right clothing to wear for the day, or to be able to prepare food, or to actually have insight into their care and support needs. So that's when, and if they are unfriended or unbefriended and they don't have anyone else appropriate to support them, it would then come to an advocate like ourselves. The IMC one, like I said, you just need to remember that it's lacking capacity, and that would have been deemed so by professionals. It would have to be a doctor or a consultant, something along those lines, psychologist. The RPR is a relevant person's paid representative. There's a lot of long words in these things, but the RPR is a person that would visit someone in a care home that lacks capacity and is not free to leave. So you might have a family member, they might be in a care home or nursing home receiving care and support. You could be that person going in as the RPR. So you'd go in on a regular basis, check that that person's wants, needs and wishes are being met, that they're being looked after well, and that they're safeguarded. But if this individual had no family and friends and no one else to go in, it could fall to an advocate or an RPR to go in. Their role would be to visit every 4 to 8 weeks to write a report on what they find. They would try and speak to the person and just say, are you happy here? They may lack capacity and may not be able to engage, but that's still our role to try and engage with that individual and find out directly from them. They may lack capacity about one aspect of their life, but not all aspects of their life. So we need to make sure we're treating them holistically as a whole person. And then what we find out, we report back to the supervisory body, which would be the council. And we would say, so maybe if this person keeps going to the front door of their care home and they keep trying to get out, but they're not saying anything else, we would look at that as a potential challenge to their placement. If they keep going to the front door, so we're not just looking for verbal signs, we're actually looking for physical signs as well. So things like that, we would escalate, we would get then a review done, we would look at their placement, we would look at what's going on, try to make it better for them. And then if not, we'd even look at maybe moving them to somewhere else that might meet their needs better. Children's looked after children, so LAC and CP is looked after children and child protection. So cases that go through for children, looked after children and child protection goes through one of our partner organisations. Yeah, we don't deliver that one directly in Croydon. So children still have a right as well, and they would get an advocate to hear their voice and help them to say during those processes of a child protection or looked after children process. And it could be that people there or children there might be being taken away from home or being returned to home. So it's really key to find out what the child in mind has in their mind. IMHA is the independent mental health, which will be going over to my colleague Michael. So I'm not going to touch on that too much. He's on one of the next slides. And IDVAS is a new one that kind of popped up over the last few years, which is an independent domestic violence advocate. They would focus in domestic violence cases, have specialized training, and would be able to work alongside people that have suffered domestic violence and be able to help them have a voice through the process. That was a lot of information there. I hope I didn't go too fast or leave anyone behind there. What's the next slide, please? So I've put in here eligibility. So not everyone is always eligible to get advocacy from a professional service, and not everyone can actually self-refer. A lot of the referrals under statutory advocacy comes from social services or professionals. So it'd be the social worker that would write to us for a referral, or it might be a doctor or someone at the hospital. They are the people that would say, so they're there checking. So we've got someone that's come in today. They are, say, 28 years old. They have got some substantial difficulty. So under the Care Act, It doesn't have to be lacking capacity. It's about having some kind of substantial difficulty, maybe memory problems, maybe understanding the information that's being given to you. And that's when we could get involved and be unbefriended. So they're looking for, do you have a support network? Do you have someone in your life that is appropriate to support you? So appropriate isn't an interesting one. So what they're looking for is a family member, not to be, for example, family member, not to be thinking of their own wants, needs and wishes, but put the other person ahead of everything else. That makes them appropriate. So if it was about housing or finances or managing that, and you've got a family member saying, oh yeah, I want this and I want that and I want this to happen, that's not necessarily the right thing. What would be nice to be an appropriate person is, I need to find out what they want. They have said this previously. This is where they have always said they'd like to be. So that's how we demonstrate that we're putting someone else before our needs. So things that would get involved in would be a needs assessment. So that could be someone new coming into the system and looking at all of the different areas of their life and what help needs they have. Then that leads into preparing a care and support plan. So that's pulling together all this information and trying to find solutions to deliver the care. If this has happened and we're now a year later, we could be reviewing that care plan. So what works well? Has the person's health and care needs changed? Does the care plan need to change with them? If you're then looking after that person, you could also have a carer's assessment. So someone that looks after someone could also go for a carer's assessment for things that can improve their life or help with their care. Preparation of a carer support plan. So once we've done the assessment, that leads into writing the support plan and agreeing it. That should be agreed with the social worker and the individual, and maybe with the support of the advocate if the individual has substantial difficulty. Review of a carer support plan. So that could be a year later, and we're looking at what's worked well, what hasn't, what needs to change. A child's transition to adult services. I did touch on that earlier. That is going from children's social workers into adult social workers and looking at different aspects of their life and trying to plan any care and support needs for them as well. And safeguarding adults cuts across everything that we do. That is about making sure that that is prioritized, that that comes first, and we're keeping people safe. That could be that there's an alert raised. There's all different types of safeguarding and abuse, financial, physical, sexual, all sorts of things. And we would be working alongside that person. And sometimes it could be that person that's close to that individual that could be the perpetrator. So in those situations, an advocate would work alongside the classed as victim and support them to make sure that they get all the help and support to say what they need. Who can refer for care? This is a social services referral. So unfortunately, you can't refer yourselves. But what I would like to get across is it's really good for everyone to be aware of what Care Act is. Because if you're then in that situation, they will have a duty to make sure you get one if you lack capacity and have no friends. But by you knowing about it and us having these conversations, gets it out there, empowers you, and you can also ask a social worker about a Care Act assessment if you know someone's having difficulty. What's the next slide, please? Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Alan. And hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. It's nice to be invited. And following on from Alan's very concise presentation there. So the advocacy that we provide in Croydon in partnership with Advocacy for All is the IMHA, Mental Health Advocacy. Independent Mental Health Advocacy stands for IMHA. As Alan touched on earlier, it's a statutory service, and there's lots of legal language around that, which I want to give you the technical stuff, but then explain it in layman's terms as well. So if you are detained under the Mental Health Act, what's commonly known as being sectioned, which is, if for those not unfamiliar with that, if you are restricted in a hospital or in the community under the legal framework of the Mental Health Act, you have a statutory right to see an independent mental health advocate. Now, in Croydon, we're very lucky that the local authority also funds the non-statutory aspect. So really, I think it's easier to just say, if you are an adult in Croydon, in hospital or outside hospital, and you would like a mental health advocate, you can access one in Croydon. And that's not true of every local authority. A lot of local authorities will only fund the statutory bit if you are sectioned or detained. In Croydon, we're very lucky that we will provide the service for both. We're funded to provide that service for both. So for people in this meeting, yeah, if you are an adult in Croydon and you would like a mental health advocate, or you know someone that would like a mental health advocate, you can speak to one. If it's something we can support with, and I'll come on to what we do support people with, it's a service you can access completely free of charge. It's confidential. And all the principles that Alan just took you through of what we do, what we don't do. We don't give advice. We do help you explore your options. Mental health is one of those areas. I've worked in mental health now since 2007. And, you know, I think people they fall on one side of the fence or the other. People are either very familiar with mental health services. I've struggled with my mental health, or family members have. I know what services there are, and I've got grievances or what I want for. Or there's other people who are at the very beginning of their journey into mental health services thinking, I think I might need some help, or I think I know a family member that might need some help. But where do we go to ask for that help? What sort of help is there available? I might have some preconceptions and misunderstandings about, well, if I ask my GP for help, will they lock me up in hospital? Will they force me on this medication? Will they tell social services that I've asked for that help? And an independent mental health advocate could help you understand what your options are, what your rights are, what you can ask for, what the consequences would be. But it's very individual to the person. So in this slide we're looking at here, it states quite clearly that IMAs, we are specifically trained, specially trained to work within the framework of the Mental Health Act. A qualifying patient, as it's referred to legally, is someone that is detained under that act. And if you don't qualify, you'd be called an informal patient or a voluntary patient. You can still access the service because the local authority in Croydon fund that. IMAs, mental health advocates, will help you understand your options and advocate for you around your mental health care and treatment. Sometimes we get referrals or calls, well, I've got a mental health issue, I need an advocate because I'm going to be evicted, or they've cut off my benefits. If, like Alan was saying earlier, we would signpost to more relevant services. If you're being evicted, you need a legal professional or an advisor that understands housing law, your rights under the Housing Act. You don't want someone who understands the Mental Health Act. And again, if your benefits have been cut off, you need someone who knows the benefit system, is trained within the benefit system. So we will explain clearly. And again, if you're not sure what type of advocate you need, you can always give us a call and we'll help you explore this. Ideally, we would want everyone to come away from this presentation knowing exactly the type of advocate they need in every situation. But we know that's not always the case. And we're more than willing to take inquiries from people saying, look, this is my problem. What sort of advocacy do I need? And more often than not, we will know and signpost you to the relevant advocate. Can I get the next slide up, please? So advocates work to many principles. We have a charter that dictates the ethics and the principles we work to. I've pulled out 4 key ones today because I could talk for an hour and a half on all the different principles and you might be asleep by the end of it. I think key ones I want to talk to you about is we are independent. I think sometimes, like I just mentioned, someone who may say, I want a mental health advocate, I need support with my mental health, but I'm not sure what my GP is going to do. Are they going to tell my social worker from years ago? Are they going to tell my housing work? So we are independent of all services. We are not clinicians or doctors. We're not part of the social work team. We don't work in partnership with a local authority that we will share that information. Our job is, as Alan stated earlier, our job is solely to work for that service user, the person who's come to us, who may give us instruction. We will present them with options and take forward what their instruction is, regardless of our own opinion. We do not work in best interest. We are, as the second principle on this slide says, we are led by the person. So I personally may have a view that, oh, this person should be on medication and this person needs this kind of support. But if that person is telling me, I really don't like medication, I don't want to be on medication, and I want to explore every option besides medication, it's not my job to say you should be on medication. My job is to maybe put forward the argument of, well, here might be the consequences of the decision you're making, but ultimately I'm led by you. Let's put forward the best argument we can for what it is that you want. I'm not clinically trained. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a pharmacist. I can't say professionally that someone should or shouldn't be on this medication. But I can support that person to formulate the best argument possible of why they don't want to be on that medication, why they may want to come off it, why they would prefer talking therapy, if that is indeed their instruction. So the third principle on this slide we're looking at is confidentiality. We, as Alan said, we're not solicitors, but we do work in a very similar way. We are instruction-led. We have total confidentiality. You can disclose things to an advocate. You may be apprehensive about disclosing to social services or your GP. What do you think if I told my GP this or that? However, there are specific instances when we would be forced to break confidentiality, and they are around safeguarding. If someone disclosed to us that, I always think a good way of thinking about it is if someone is in imminent danger, if someone disclosed to me, I'm thinking of harming myself, or I'm having paranoid thoughts, so I started carrying a knife in my bag, or I'm gonna do something which would put myself or someone else in imminent danger, I would have a legal duty to disclose that to the relevant authorities. But we would always explain that first. At the beginning of any advocacy relationship, we explain clearly, you can disclose these things to me and I can keep that confidential. However, if it falls within this category, I would have to hand that over. And we would always do that by talking to the individual. It would never be, we'll go behind your back and it's a surprise that we've disclosed something. We would always say, because you've mentioned this, I would have to disclose that. So it's always worth being aware of that. You do have confidentiality, but there are certain duties that we have where we have to hand over if someone, and it can be yourself, is in imminent danger. The last principle on this list of 4 is empowerment. I really like this one because it following on from everything Alan said, we don't give advice. We don't say, I know what's best for you. I know what you should be doing. You should be talking to this person. You should have this type of therapy. Let you sit back and let me do all the work, and I'll go in and I'll talk on your behalf. And actually that person may already be able to speak on their own behalf. And it would be disempowering of me to say, yeah, you be quiet while I do all the talking. And this is about me now. It's always person-centered. The service user, client, advocacy client has to be at the center, and we want to empower them and build on the skills they already have. We don't want to take away any skills. So some people may choose to instruct an advocate to, please come to this meeting with my social worker. They don't listen to me. I want you to do all the talking because I get really nervous in those situations. Other people may say, I actually don't need you to come to that meeting. Could you just write down the language that I should be using if I want to challenge that, because I get a little bit too emotional and frustrated, and I want to make sure I put forward my argument as well as possible. So we might just help someone write a few paragraphs of, here's how you might want to structure that argument of coming off medication, being medication free, accessing talking therapy that you're being denied access to for whatever reason. So it really is a conversation between the advocate and the advocacy client about what's going to work best for that advocacy client. And And we're always led by the client as well. Sometimes if I feel, well, this person can self-advocate, but they're telling me, look, I really need you there for moral support. It would really help me feel more confident just to know you've got someone next to me. It's about being person-led and keeping that advocacy client at the very center so they get what they want from their mental health care and treatment. Can we go on to the next slide, please? So things that a mental health advocate can do around your care and treatment. And this list is not exhaustive, but common issues we support advocacy clients with are making complaints about their experience within the mental health system. And this is separate to NHS complaints advocacy, which is another strand of advocacy. But anything around people's experience when they were sectioned or detained on a ward, or their experience around accessing mental health services. And that can take many forms. That could be an informal conversation with your social worker, care coordinator, their team leader, maybe a change of social workers needed, maybe speaking to someone higher up in mental health services, or making a formal complaint. Again, our job is to help people explore their options, and then they tell us how they want to proceed. Discussing treatment options. This is a big one. A lot of people don't know what their options are. They just think, well, and I'm guilty of this as well. I go to my GP, I explain an issue, and the doctor tells me this is what I should do. So I go, okay, he's the doctor, he must know what the best option is. But maybe there are other options that maybe you're not happy with that one option the doctor's provided you with, and you want to know, well, what are the alternatives? Do I have to do that? Is there talking therapy or an activity? Or maybe if I just did yoga and access some counseling, I wouldn't need the medication. Or maybe I don't actually like counseling and I'd rather be on medication. And again, it's just understanding what options are available. And until you know what your options are, you can't fight for that and argue that and say, actually, I don't want that, I prefer that. And most people will just go along with what clinicians will say, oh, this will be good for you. So attending hospital ward rounds is a big one. When people are inpatients in psychiatric hospital, that weekly ward round with the doctor, meeting the doctor and the clinical team should happen once a week. And could be the most important 15 minutes of your inpatient experience that week, because it's where the decisions are made. It's where the information is gathered. It's where your opinion is included. And it's where things like, can I leave the ward for 20 minutes a day to go and have a cigarette? Can I go out with my family if they come to visit? Can I ask about a referral to a different service, or I want to move to a different ward, or I'm too far away from my family? That's where all the decisions get made. And it can be a very intimidating experience for inpatients. If you think about it, I've gone to hospital, either forced against my will or voluntary, because I'm suffering with my mental health. I'm already quite distressed. I'm in an unfamiliar setting. I just want to go home, and I'm locked on a ward with lots of other people who are experiencing the same thing, and it can be a really challenging environment. So to be on my A game in that 15-minute meeting with the doctor, to calmly and concisely put forward what I want and make sure I get what I want out of that meeting, can be quite intense. And more, as Alan said, more often than not, family will visit and join those meetings and advocate, even though they might not know that that's what they're doing. But that can also be quite stressful for family. Families don't always know how those meetings are meant to work. And also the doctors and the nurses and the OTs and the psychologists, they have an agenda of what they want to get out of that meeting. And it might be different to what the patient wants to get out of that meeting. So an advocate can help you make sure that you know what you can get out of the meeting and make sure those things get addressed. Following on from that, supporting you at meetings generally and speaking up on your behalf are all things that advocates do. I've sort of touched on that when I talked about ward rounds, so I won't repeat and labor the point, but can I see the next slide, please? So mental health advocates also help with many things like writing letters or supporting the advocacy client to write letters. accessing information. Sometimes a lot of what advocates do is just empowering someone to be armed with all the information they can to support their argument. If an advocacy client doesn't want to be on a certain medication, going into that meeting saying, I just don't want to be on that medication, will not win the argument. But maybe if we arrange a meeting with the pharmacist, maybe if we do research on side effects of medication and bring information of what has worked in the past and medication that they would like to be on. And it's about formulating the right argument to get that advocacy client what they want. Exercising people's rights. I hear more often than not when people are especially detained on an inpatient psychiatric unit that, I don't have any rights here. I don't have any choice. I'm locked up here. And everyone has rights, especially when you're detained under the Mental Health Act in hospital. You have a right to see a solicitor free of charge. Legal aid has been cut back in so many ways in the last 10 years, but you still have the right to access legal aid and see a mental health solicitor of your choosing when you're detained under the Mental Health Act. And that is to appeal. A lot of people say, I've been sectioned illegally. I don't need to be here. I don't need to be. I disagree with being sectioned. People are free of charge at no cost to themselves can see a mental health solicitor and appeal that section and take their clinical team to a tribunal where an independent doctor will review their whole case, the reasons they were sectioned, the processes that were followed or not followed, and the tribunal has the power to discharge people. There are lots of other rights, but a mental health advocate is there to help people explore that and understand what choices they have. I've touched on earlier signposting you to relevant agencies. We're not benefits advisors. There's lots of overlapping issues that happen when someone's mental health is deteriorating, and it can be a mixture of lots of, my housing is in substandard condition, my landlord is pressuring me for whatever reason, my benefits have been cut off, I'm out of work. We will sift through that and signpost you to the specialists that you need to see, who are experts in their field. We would be the experts in your mental health care and treatment. But if it's around housing, benefits, employment law, the way you've been treated at work, we wouldn't pretend to be experts in that, and we would signpost you on to people that are. Empowerment is the big watchword in advocacy. You've heard it repeated a lot today. And self-advocacy is always the goal. I think that in terms of mental health advocacy and across all advocacy, how do you judge the quality of an advocate? If someone keeps coming back to us with the same issue and we keep advocating for them, you may question, are we doing our jobs? Are we creating a dependency on us? Ultimately, our goal would be that we can at some point step back and that advocacy client is able to self-advocate and they no longer need us. That isn't always realistic. That isn't, and we would never force someone into that position and say, you're only allowed 3 sessions, then you have to self-advocate. If someone is that anxious or intimidated or, overwhelmed with anxiety when they go to those meetings, they can have a mental health advocate at every meeting. But where people do have the skills and the ability to self-advocate, that would always be the goal. That we, at some point, we would step back and they would no longer need us. And listening, I think, listening to the advocacy clients, ultimately, they are our boss. They are who we work for. We work on their instruction, regardless of our own personal or professional opinion. I've often advocated for people for things that I do not agree with and I do not think is right for them. But that's not my job. My job isn't to put forward my personal opinion. My job is to support the advocacy client, to make their argument and put forward their point of view and ensure their voice is heard. I can see someone's hand is up, and I think if we go to the next slide, there will be a point where we can ask questions. So I'm going to stop talking there, and I don't know if someone else wants to field questions, but I'd be happy to answer any if they're for me.
Hi. Are we able to unmute Welgie because she's got her hand up?
Okay,
Would
do you want to
Michael be
unmute
able to
yourself?
share his contact?
Please
So
go
just
ahead
got
and unmute and ask your question.
Hi. Probably a mistake, is it? Hi, Welgie.
All of our details will be shared, and so if anyone needs to contact any of our organisations, all of our contact details, I think they're in the presentation at the end. If you want to share the presentation as well, that's not a problem.
Yeah, that's fine. I can share that with everybody that's on the call. That's fine. Is there any questions from anybody? Oh, Michael's put that kindly on for us. Thank you, Michael. Is there any questions from anybody? Please do unmute yourself.
Please do unmute yourself. It's Julia. I understand that I've got clients who've got housing issues. So I take it that they can't be, this is not the place to come to help them, really, is it?
Depends really on the type of if they're open to a social worker and it's the housing issue is maybe linked to a Care Act assessment and they don't have the relevant support and they have some substantial difficulty, you could speak to that social worker to get a referral in for an advocate and have a look down that route. But if it's just like a housing related issue on its own, places like shelter might be a good place to go to.
Basically, she doesn't feel she's got not only mental health, but physical health. And she doesn't feel that it's suitable for her. She feels like it's not improving her. It's not good for her mental health being where she is.
Okay.
And she has appealed to the council. So it's not as though a lot of our clients, it's not as though they haven't got the ability to speak. It's more people don't listen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that all the time. People say about active listening, but yeah, trying to make people listen is a difficult thing. So I mean, there's routes through housing. There is about evidence. I mean, there's a lot of things there to unpick, but I'd kind of say we also signpost people to their local MPs with housing related issues because they have a hotline through to the housing departments. So your local MP might be able to assist. It might be about trying to gather the relevant evidence to maybe overturn the council's decision or whoever's the decision maker is about the housing. If you're saying it's not appropriate for that person, what makes it not appropriate? What's not working for them?
Well, I mean, it's, number one, it's just not fit for purpose. She says there's vermin and there's
Okay, is it rented accommodation, council accommodation?
Well, I think it's, I mean, I think she's got housing benefits, so it would be council. I don't know whether I don't know whether it's private landlord, but I think she'd be on housing benefit.
So that gets it slightly difficult. So if she owns her own property, there might be a different route. If it's a private landlord, there'll be a different route. So if it's a private landlord and she's having trouble with vermin, the Citizens Advice Bureau do have legal teams that would be able to take that forward. If it's a private one, there's generally not much I think we would get involved in there. That wouldn't be us, but yeah. You would have.
Just to jump in there, we often signpost people with these issues to the Southwest London Law Centre. They help with rented homes in such poor condition that it's affecting someone's health. I'm going to pop a link and those details in the chat.
Yes, that is the thing. I do know about the Southwest London, and I know about Citizens Advice Bureau. I'm trying to figure out where you fit in.
Okay, so in that situation, if this person is supported, we wouldn't fit in. We kind of, advocacy is there really for people that don't have anyone else that suffers difficulty or some substantial difficulty or lacks capacity. Michael?
And we may get
mainly
involved.
for people who lack.
And we sorry to cut you off there. We may get involved if the person's housing is part of a placement through the mental health team. Sometimes when people come out of hospital or they're working towards their independence, they could be in supported accommodation, which is paid for by mental health services. So that's the only housing issue we might get involved in, where it's part of their mental health care and treatment. Otherwise, we would be signposting to CAB in Southwest London.
There's been a lot on the news, though, recently for Croydon properties and vermin and not being up to a standard. I know this is a hot topic at the moment, and Croydon is suffering really badly for bad press on this.
Yeah, okay, so it's mainly, I'm just trying to figure out whether is it mainly for people who do not have capacity?
It's mainly lacking capacity or having substantial difficulties. They might have a learning difficulty. They might have a learning disability. It could be early stages of dementia, for example, where that's where we would fit in under Care Act. If someone lacks total capacity on a decision, that would be our IMCA side of things. If it's mental health, then it's Michael and Mind. So maybe we're not the answer, because we're not always, people are not always eligible for our service, which is a shame. That is about funding. So councils will fund statutory duties like they have to do, so we can provide Care Act, IMCA, IMHA, RPR services, because they have to fund it. But the things that you're talking about there could be in a professional advocacy. So they might look at different things, different topics. It may be that their eligibility is different, but that's not often funded, and it does vary borough to borough. So there may be other advocacy providers in Croydon that could offer you some guidance or support or advocacy around this, but it would be very much down to their own individual funding from probably an external source. So they might have a grant from somewhere which allows them to do work which is different to the statutory advocacy. It might be worth trying to see if they exist, but I don't hear many of those.
Thank you, Alan. We've got Yen. Thank you. Yen, can you unmute yourself and ask your question, please?
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi. I've got a few actually. So I wanted to talk about blurred lines between capacity and mental health for the advocacy role. So an example is somebody with very severe mental health issues, and we're talking severe on, what's the word called, treatment-resistant schizophrenia. So they're totally delusional. And the blurred line between capacity and the capacity assessment, together with the delusional, finding what is the mental health and what is capacity. So we're talking about an older person who could even have early stage dementia, but a capacity assessment isn't possible because of the mental health condition. And going on further to that, so basically not having for one side, for the mental health, not having the possibility to do a capacity assessment, and yet for dolls, because we haven't, I was wondering if you were actually going to cover dolls as well with this capacity side of what we're talking about. So having the rights removed basically under DOLS, and therefore there is a capacity element to a client. So basically, which of the two advocacies is more relevant for a client like this? So that, I suppose that's one question. So do you see what I mean by the blurred lines between the two? And also, so on another side, actually I've got three, so that's one. When, Michael, you talked about the wishes, so you advocate for the wishes of a person, but if a person is so delusional, let's say, that their wishes are not even they could be their own wishes, but it could be the wishes of the voices they're hearing. The assessor, let's say, doesn't actually understand which is which. It's usually the family member who's very close to the person who knows which is real and which isn't. I don't know if you follow what I mean. Even a trained psychiatrist may not actually realize what is real and what isn't in that person's mind with regards to wishes. So how can you advocate for wishes that are not actually really known? Again, I'm not sure if I'm clear on that, especially with regarding medication. Last one, what if the perpetrator is the system? Yeah, so if assessments are dependent on a system, so going through social services or going through, I don't know who else is in, could be the whole lot, the GPs, they're all interconnected really. And what if there is, so who would you then go to? So those are my questions. Sorry to be so long-winded.
I think that is quite technical. I mean, whatever advice we can give will be grateful, I think.
And just to come in on that, I think I'm sure Alan has got plenty to say on that as well, because there is a bit of crossover.
Not me.
Okay, then I'm happy to field it. In terms of capacity and capacity assessment, so the Mental Capacity Act clearly lays out, that everyone is assumed to have capacity unless it is determined that they lack capacity. So just by having a mental health issue, just by having schizophrenia, even just by being sectioned and detained in an inpatient unit, doesn't mean you are, to choose your words, so deluded or that they're unable to make any decisions in their life at all. Capacity assessments are decision and time specific, and they have to be, they have to be in an area where a decision needs to be made. So if someone is saying that, it's about a change of accommodation or serious medical treatment or control of the finances, as an advocate, I would be arguing, well, when was that capacity assessment done? Who by? And if it was 8 months ago, well, it's probably worth reviewing that, because people have fluctuating capacity. So then maybe many capacity assessments need to be done over a period of time. And there's, without getting too technical, but there's very clear rules laid out of how they test capacity. Can the person weigh up the decision, retain the information? I won't regurgitate the Mental Capacity Act here because I don't know it all in my head. Without going into too much detail, I'm happy to speak to people outside of this meeting. Our contact details.
Yeah, that might be quite useful. Maybe I'll give you a ring because it's quite technical.
But to come on to your second point, the wishes of the person, if they are delusional, or as a mental health advocate, I am, part of my role and part of the principles we work to is I'm not allowed to decide that someone is delusional and what they're saying just doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to listen to that. Or actually now what they're saying makes sense, so I'll take that instruction. I assume everyone has capacity and I follow their instruction unless it's been informed to me by the doctor that they lack capacity in this area. And then it becomes a different ball game of advocacy. Then it might be a referral to Alan's team for an IMCA.
Okay. So
or
you
I
do
might be
work
working in
together.
or I might be working in
Okay.
a non-instructed capacity if the person's within the Mental Health Act framework. So there is a lot of crossover, and it's not always clear. And some people, the capacity fluctuates at different times.
And we can work in partnership as well. So it could be that Michael and mine's team is looking at the Mental Health Act, and that the advocate is looking at the Independent Mental Capacity Act. So there is, I've had cases before though in the past where which one trumps which one is the most powerful. Michael, when would the Mental Health Act trump Capacity Act? Do you know that one?
Honestly, I don't know. And I've been in similar meetings where it's not always clear. And sometimes I think, oh, that's when it is. But then there's another case where it's the other way. I always go by the principle. I've worked on cases where, there's an IMHA from Mind in Croydon and an IMCA from Advocacy for All. But we're very clearly, the IMCA will be focusing on the change of accommodation and those, if that is indeed what it's about, or serious medical treatment. Whereas the IMHA will then be looking at the mental health care and treatment side of things. But it's not always easy. And some of those cases are quite rare, but they do come up, and they're always a challenge where it's just lots of conversations between the advocacy services of going, is it you, is it us, where is it this? And
that's what I was
at every point making sure the client is at the center of that.
That's what I was thinking about, those blurred lines, because it's very big crossover.
Yep, and we would always be there working together, and Michael and my teams would share meetings and engage with the client probably at the same time, possibly, if it works that way, person-centered.
One last thing I just wanted to touch on that I did remember from one of the principles of the Mental Capacity Act is people have a right to make unwise decisions. So a lot of times people can be said, well, they're mentally ill and they're saying they want this, but that doesn't make sense. They want to spend all their money going to the bookies, or they want to spend, and people, that doesn't, just because people aren't making a decision that we would agree with doesn't mean they lack capacity. We all have a right in all our lives to make unwise decisions. That's what it's called in the Mental Capacity Act. But it is a fine line. If someone is making an unwise decision that I want to give up my secure tenancy and live under a bridge on the streets, you sort of think, well, hang on, we all have a right to make unwise decisions, but you're going to be placing yourself at serious risk.
That becomes safeguarding, I imagine.
Exactly. So it's always a conversation between all the people to go, where is that line? And how can we keep the client at the center of that and protect their wishes, but also safeguard their rights?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering that. So I've got a question here from Phil. I think Michael's kind of answered it already. So what would Phil need to do in this instance, Michael?
It's difficult to know. I think Phil mentioned something in the chat about if you're being falsely accused of something.
Yeah.
I mean,
shall I just read that? Shall I just read out the question? So where would I go to get advocacy for being falsely accused of allegations? As I tried Advocacy for All, but it's outside of their remit. Is there an organization I can approach to advocate for me as I want to challenge this? And it has kind of had quite a big impact on Phil's mental health. So if you can just give a bit of direction, maybe. That will be quite useful.
It depends on the nature of the allegations and the consequences of those allegations being out there. I mean, not to make light, but anyone can allege anything about another person. It all depends who they are and what are those allegations. And, you can't control people saying things. Is it a neighbor just saying? And I would sort of ask Philip, we don't have to go into detail in this public forum. I'm happy to have a conversation with you outside of this privately that protects your confidentiality. But, there's a difference between a neighbor that said something about me that alleges this and it's not true, to social services alleging something that then has consequences of. So, is it a criminal justice matter? Is it an adult social care matter? Is it a child protection matter? Or is it just a personal matter between myself and some friends that have said this about me in a public forum or in a public space? And those would all have very different, routes to addressing that, or action you could take. And I wouldn't want Philip to disclose too much here.
Yep. Can I get Philip to call you afterwards, Michael, just to have a conversation and see if there's any help that you can do? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Phil, is that okay? Hope that's okay, Phil. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Is there anybody else that's got questions? I don't see any hands up. Don't think there's anything on the chat either. Okay, nothing. I think from anybody. So thank you. That was such a lot of information that you guys covered today, and a lot of stuff that, you know, just think, wow, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. And I think people will find it really useful. If they weren't able to join today, when they watch the YouTube video, so we will be kind of publicizing it. And everybody who's asked questions, please do let us know if you want any of your questions, if you want your questions edited out. Or what have you. So just wanted to say thank you really to both of you for the session today. I found it really informative. So as there's no other questions, so if we just go on to the rest of the agenda, and then I think we can close. So yeah, so sorry, 1 second. So yeah, everybody probably knows about this already. So we've got the Friends Food Club at the Broad Green Hub on Keeley Road. So please do, you know, come and see us. I think it's every Tuesday. And then we've got Tuesday Talk as well. This is quite a new initiative. So if there's anything that you want to talk, like if you want us to put on like talks and stuff like that, please do let us know, because this is kind of a new initiative, but please try and join us when you can. And then this is our free weekly Pilates class. It is on Zoom at the moment, which is every Friday. So yeah, if you want to stay fit. And we've got dance therapy as well. That's also on Tuesdays. So if you wanted to register for that, please contact Naeem. These are all on our website as well. And then we do free health checks as part of our long-term health conditions project, which is run by Lizzie, my colleague. So there's lots and lots of events going on. So sometimes we go over to different venues to do health checks. So if it's close to you, please do go ahead and kind of book yourself one, or just turn up and we'll do your measurements, so to speak. Not always a good thing when somebody wants to measure your waist, but yeah, it's all for good measure, and you do get lots out of it. And I know Yen is one of our health champions, and she's usually at most of these as well. So this is a new project that's happening. So this is starting in December, which is Introduction to Digital Skills. So please do have a look at our website and sign up if you would find this useful. And finally, as part of the Here to Talk project, we've got a face-to-face event on the 9th of November, which is like this is the first one that it's gonna that is happening. So I hope to see most of you there if you can make it. So it's on the 9th of November, and that will be at Keeley Road, so the big local Broad Green. So please do join us if you can. And with that, I think you have got 16 minutes back of your lives. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Bina. Thank you, everyone, for having us.
Thanks, Michael.
Nice to meet you all.
And I think Alan tried to run away.
There's always a delivery.
Oh, right.
There was someone at the door. Sorry. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Lovely
Thank
to meet you all.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.